Khalas, we want to go home. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walam. A great thanks from me and gratitude to the Medina Institute family, starting with Shaykh Ninawi, Hafidahullah, and everyone else behind him for allowing me to spend this evening with you to share my new book, Gate to Medina. So, I come here frequently and I teach, but this is the first time that I get to share with you something that's very personal. If you're an author and you spend time thinking about something, and then if that thinking takes you to writing and then to producing the book, it's like, I don't know what the right analogy is, but it's almost like you're giving birth to a child, and now the child is out there and you have to kind of talk about your child, and it's a very personal and emotional sort of thing. So maybe we can begin with that, which is, why did I decide to write this book? Most people don't read anymore, and most people don't appreciate that. If you're a thinker, and in my experience, I'm speaking about my experience, if you're a thinker and if something bothers you long enough, you seek to try to figure out how to solve it, or why is it bothering you, or is there an answer? And this was the case with this book, which something was bothering me, which is that there were all of these, what I come to call false versions of Islam that I've encountered throughout my life. And I'm sure many of you have the same experience. Why does Islam not sound intelligent? Why does Islam look bad? Why does Islam sound very simplistic? This is my experience, growing up. Why am I always coming up against this very unsophisticated, unintelligent, unintellectual Islam? And why are the people that are practicing Islam, the people that I interact with, why do they seem to be disenfranchised? And why are the people that are in power and the people that are successful, and the ones that are not practicing? So these type of questions were kind of always in and out of my mind. And I was unable to articulate what that was, what that feeling was, and that bothered me. I could understand what a true Islam was, an Islam that I studied, an Islam that is educated, an Islam that is connected back to the Prophet ﷺ. When I came to Al-Azhar to study, I learned about the core sciences of the Sharia, the rational sciences, the traditional sciences, the inherited science, al-ulum al-aqliya wal-naqliya, so on and so forth. So I got to experience that. And what I experienced when I was in the seminary, what I experienced when I was in Al-Azhar, was something that was truly magical, really from the first day. The first week I was at Al-Azhar, let me just tell you this little anecdote. This was the first week, it hasn't even been a week, like maybe day 4, day 5. Sitting in the classroom, and Al-Azhar is a tourist site, so there were tourists that come and go. So there was a group of British tourists, and they make the women wear this very ugly green, like abaya, and it looks, and it was the summer. So they look like an odd group of people walking, like, oh, those are the tourists. So the tour guide brought them into what's called a riwaq. A riwaq is a schoolhouse. He brought the tour group into the riwaq, and they were like at the door, and the Shaykh was sitting like the way I'm sitting now and teaching, and I was on the floor. And they weren't very quiet, so the tour guide, closer? Yes. So the tour guide came to the Shaykh, and he said that this older lady, she would like to ask you a question. So the Shaykh looked at me and he said, Tarek, come and translate. So I got up and started to translate, and the lady was asking the Shaykh, she's like, this place is magical, there's something special about this place. So the Shaykh was like, yeah, this is an ancient seminary, it's over 1,000 years of continuous teaching of Islam, and it is a blessed place. She's like, no, 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 there's something else. There's something, I feel something in this place. There's something in this place that I did not feel outside. So the Shaykh said, oh, these are the angels, because in our gatherings of remembrance, the angels surround us. So the lady said, I want what's in this place. So he said, okay, say after me, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, Ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. And she took her shahada and she left. That was my first week. I was like, what just happened? I mean, I've never been in something like that. I've never seen anything like that. So I experienced this beauty of Islam, a coherent Islam. But in the back of my mind, I have this problem that there's this ugly version of Islam. So my whole life, maybe many of you can sympathize with this kind of tension. It wasn't until many years later that I discovered the writings of Robert Pirsig, who was a very famous American philosopher. And he's well known for writing this famous book. I mean, it's a very common book, a very popular book, Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. So I read Robert Pirsig, and like, 10 pages into the book, I'm like, why didn't they teach us this in school? This is very important stuff. Of course, because I had studied Islam and I've studied Tasawwuf, and I mean, I benefited from the book. I'm not going to say I didn't benefit from the book, but I had another type of, understanding of metaphysics. But what I discovered when I read this book is that Robert Pirsig wrote a second book that almost nobody knows about, called Alla, an Inquiry into Values. So I was like, well, I read one book, I might as well read a second book. So I read his second book, and towards the end of the book, he introduces this phrase called philosophology. Fake philosophy. People that talk about philosophy, but don't practice philosophy. I was like, Allahu Akbar, that's the term, that's the category that I've been missing to describe Islamology, the fake versions of Islam. The people that talk about Islam but don't do the Islam, or the people that want to use Islam for something nefarious or for something personal or whatever the case may be, but they have not submitted themselves to Islam. So that was, for me, was a very big light bulb, moment. And I wrote these few articles I posted on my website, 4 examples of Islamology. So in the book, in the first half of the book, I talk about the academic study of Islam, because I studied in the academy as well, and when I was at Princeton, where I did my PhD, I definitely came very in close contact with the academic study of religion. And the problem I had with the academic study of religion is that it's interesting in the classroom. I was very interesting to learn about queer theory and gender theory, and to look at religion from the lens of Marxism. I mean, as an intellectually inclined person, that was very stimulating. But it was just that. It was just something you did in the classroom. But when the Arab Spring happened in Tunisia, and then it followed by that in Egypt, and I saw many of my colleagues in the academy actually talk about what was happening, I mean, they sounded like buffoons. So you don't know what's happening. I mean, because Egypt is very close to me. This is something, and the religious establishment in Egypt, I mean, that's where I was trained. I mean, it's very personal for me. So I was like, this is not Islam. What are you guys talking about? This is that stuff that we talked about in the classroom. You actually believe in that stuff? That's not Islam. That's just some Ivy League, I thought it was just a way to exercise your mind. So I talk about the academic study of Islam, fundamentalists and Salafis, the untrained, and political activists. So these are the 4 types of Islamologists I talk about in the first half of the book. Of course, there are many other derivatives, but in my experience, these are the 4 that I've always come up with the most and continue to interact with. So I figured, well, in the first half of the book, I wanted to share, after I wrote those articles, I was like, well, maybe I can expand this into a book. And then I realized that it's really one half of the story. The second half of the story is I want to talk about true Islam, or a beautiful Islam, what I later title the art of Islam. So for me to get to that, it was an attempt for me to understand what art was. When I got to Al-Azhar, the Islam that I heard sounded beautiful. Because I was trained in music as a young person, and I used to sing opera, I used to play the piano. used to attend the opera with my mother. The theater, I was an actor in high school. So the performing arts is something that I can relate to. And I love classical music. I love Mozart, especially Mozart. And when I got to Al-Azhar, what I was hearing sounded like what I used to hear when I would listen to Mozart, in the sense that everything came together in a symphony. It all sounded right. The right amount of words, the right amount of references, everything was balanced. So to give you a sense of how I studied, we would sit in this classroom. It was a little bit smaller than this space, and all surrounding the walls were books, references. And the class was largely in usul al-fiqh, a very advanced class in usul al-fiqh. So the Shaykh would, I'm a Shafi'i, my Shaykh is a Shafi'i, so this is Shafi'i usul al-fiqh. But amongst us were people of other madhabs. So we would be reading something, and then one of the students is called a sarid. A sarid is the student who reads out loud. So the sarid would be reading, and then in the front row, everybody would have a different copy of the book. Somebody would have a manuscript, somebody would have a first print, which was called al-hajari print, which was a type of lithograph, and then a first printed, all of these different. And then if the sarid read something, and then somebody else had a different word or a different voweling, the other person would call out, no, in my copy it says this, or my copy says this. So the Shaykh will be like, what do you think is right? And this one is like, oh, this should be mansoob, oh, this should be marfu'. I was like, what's your dalil? So they go to the bookshelf, they'll get the Alfaya of Imam Malik, rahimahullah, and they'll look at the references to, so nothing was left undiscussed. And then because the Shaykh was a Shafi'i, he would ask the Hanafi students to argue against him the Hanafi position. It's called a ta'jiz, you try to stump the teacher. So the Hanafis would argue the Hanafi position and say, well, you're wrong, Maulana, because of 1, 2, 3. And then the Shaykh would respond. And back and forth, until we arrived at a reconciled. I mean, I've never seen anything like that in my life. It was just beautiful. It sounded beautiful. I felt beautiful. It was, Bukhur was in the classroom, it smelled nice. And you were in Al-Azhar, I mean, my God, I can only imagine the thousands of people that had been there and prayed there and studied there since the time it was inception. So how do I articulate that feeling? I went back to what I knew, which was literature and music. And then I came across this beautiful definition by Tolstoy about the definition of art. See if I can pull it up for you quickly. I know it seems like I'm rambling, but I'm going to come to some points here. So this is Tolstoy's definition of art. He says, the human activity which consists in one man's consciously conveying to others by certain external signs the feelings he has experienced, and in others being infected by those feelings and also experiencing them. So that also resonated with me because I felt something when I was studying in the seminary, and that felt to me similar to when I would see a symphony, or if I would see an opera by Mozart, or if I even participated in a play of Shakespeare. I felt something similar. It was a feeling. So I started to hone in on this idea that art is the transmission of feeling. So what was the feeling of Islam? Could there be an art of Islam? I don't mean art in Islam. I'm not talking about Islamic art. I'm talking about Islam itself being art. What is the art of Islam? How do you communicate? How could I communicate in words that which I experienced? I could teach Islam, that's what I do, for a living. I come here frequently in other places, I teach the different sciences. But I'm talking about something more than that. How do I communicate to you that which I felt, which is juxtaposed to that which I was running away from my whole life, which was this false version of Islam. So I started to read more about art and aesthetics. And I started to read the biographies of people like Mozart and Shakespeare. As a matter of fact, I spent 6-7 months last year. I read the entire Shakespeare canon. I read all of the plays from the beginning to the end. Many of them I've read before, but some of them I'd not read at all, like the histories and things like that. and I reread the Canterbury Tales, and I don't like Dante too much because he puts the Prophet ﷺ in the hellfire, and I have a big problem with that. So I don't care what people say about Dante. I'm not going to... I try to reread... I read him in high school, but I try to reread Dante. I didn't get past the first volume. I was like, you know what? I don't want to read this guy. But anyway, I read other forms, and I started to realize that there is a way that we can talk about the art of Islam by understanding who the artist of Islam is. So I started to figure out that there is this overlap between what in the Western world we call an artist, the person that does what Tolstoy is saying. The artist has a vision, a unified vision of something that they convey through their art. So it doesn't matter what the art is. It doesn't matter if it's painting or poetry or music or the performing arts or dance. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether they are art forms we appreciate. I don't appreciate very much the ballet. I never really the Nutcracker or something simple like that, but I'm not a person of ballet, but I can appreciate that it's an art form. I've been blessed to be to the Vatican twice, and both times I saw the Sistine Chapel. There is no doubt that that's a piece of art. Now, I don't resonate with the anthropomorphic nature of that art. It's not my kind of art. I'm not going to draw God. That's, astaghfirullah azim. But I can appreciate that this comes from something. There's a feeling that people of faith have when they're in the Sistine Chapel, especially Christians. There's no doubt about that. And so on and so forth. So it doesn't really matter then what medium the artist is using. So when I say artist, usually we think of somebody who's on drugs and up all night and living a bohemian lifestyle. And actually that's really not the case. There are some people like that. But the real artists are people who have to put in a lot of hard work, mastering their craft. One of my favorite authors, Shelby Foote, whom I quote frequently in the book and in also my last book, he said, art is long. It's not something that's easy. All of those words, all of those sentiments, I started thinking, well, that's what the life of the ulama was like. The ilm is not easy. For somebody to master any of the Islamic sciences, it's a lot of hard work. And you have to do it over and over again. Think of somebody who's memorized the Quran. You don't finish your hifd and then you're done. That's actually when you start. You have to go over it over. You have to read the Quran at least twice a month, if not 3 times a month. You have to finish the Quran at least once every 10 days. That means you're reading at least 3 juz a day for the rest of your life. That's mastery. And when I started thinking, when I do this publicly, I don't write about it in the book, but I use Taylor Swift as an example. Because Taylor Swift is a master of her craft. Can any one of us imagine Taylor Swift not being a musician? She's been strumming on that guitar since she was just a teenager. She is that music. She just she wakes up in the morning and boom, it's music. She is that. You can't think of her other than that. That's who she is. It's inextricably linked to her being. Do we have a term like that? Actually, we do. We call it faqihun nafs. The master of any Islamic science is called the jurist of the self, faqihun or faqihul badan. They call it in the science of hadith, the jurist of the body. Meaning that science that they are a master of is to that alim the way music is to Taylor Swift. In Al-Azhar they used to say if you took the alim and you wrung him out, he would drop out that science. It would just drop out of him. Can you think of Imam al-Nawawi not being a person of these sciences? That's who Imam al-Nawawi was. Hadith and fiqh and usul and so on and so. That's who he was, radiyallahu anhu. And Imam al-Nawawi is a very peculiar figure in our intellectual history because he is universally accepted across all of the madhahib, across all of the sects. Nobody has said anything bad about Imam al-Nawawi radiallahu anhu. It's completely divorced from this dunya and completely dedicated to the sciences. So I started to see that there is an expert, a quote-unquote artist of Islam. And that artist is the mujtahid. the person who has reached mastery of their craft. Now, ijtihad is not something that is only in fiqh. Usually we think about it as only as like a super faqih. But you can be a mujtahid in any science, in any discipline. Now, the thing about ijtihad is that it's not just a mastery of the craft. It's also a spiritual mastery of the self. There are two sides to it. There are two sides to the same coin. So the mujtahid is the saint. And I have a couple of chapters on that where I mentioned that and explain it to you. As a matter of fact, in the lengthier books of usul al-fiqh, one of the latter chapters in any usul al-fiqh discussion is the chapter of ijtihad. And following that would be the chapter of tasawwuf. Well, why would in an usul al-fiqh book, why do you conclude with the book of tasawwuf? Because the mujtahid cannot really be a mujtahid unless they are a spiritually awakened person. Because they are going to take those tools to the Quran and Sunnah and communicate to us a feeling and understanding that they have understood inside themselves. They are going to communicate it out to us. And that is exactly what Tolstoy is saying the definition of art is. I know it sounds like it's a stretch, but hopefully I do a better job in the book form in walking you through how I link these things together. So this is where I came to the title, Gate to Medina. There's a famous passage in the Odyssey of Homer in which Penelope, the wife, she talks about the two gates to the city being the two types of dreams that people have, one being a false dream and one being a true dream. So originally I was going to call it Two Gates to the City. And then I realized when I investigated the original passage from Homer, I realized, well, if there's false dreams, there's really only one true gate to the city. And that true gate to the city is also a testament to the character of Imam Ali alayhi salam, who is the gate to the city quite literally, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ana madinatul ilmi wa aliyun babuha." I am the city of knowledge and Ali is its gate. So I was like, this is tawfiq, alhamdulillah. It is the gate to the city. So why is it summarized in the character of Imam Ali alayhi salam? Because Imam Ali, from both Sunni and Shia sources, was the most knowledgeable of the companions. He was a mujtahid without doubt. And he is at the top of the spiritual edifice of Islam. Almost all of our chains of transmission of all of the Sufi orders, not all of them, but 90% of them go through Imam Ali alayhi salam to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So that's where the title is. And this artwork is actually original. I had it commissioned by a Canadian Lebanese artist. Her name is Salwa Najm. So shout out to Salwa, who was a pleasure to work with her, very professional. And the reason I discovered Salwa is that she made a hijrah map to look like a map from the Lord of the Rings. And I was like, oh, Islam and Tolkien? I'm like, this is my kind of thing. So I reached out to her and we started this conversation, and I said, look, I'm working on this book called Gate to Medina, and we discussed how I wanted the artwork. So she drew this, alhamdulillah, and I wanted to recognize her for that. And actually I conclude the whole book with a line of poetry from the Lord of the Rings on the tongue of Frodo and the hobbits as they leave the Lord of the Rings. So in the book you will find a lot of references to Shakespeare and Mozart and so on and so forth. So if it's all right with you, I would like to read to you a passage or two. Is that okay with everybody? So, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. So let me just give you a taste of sort of the way I think about this. So I talk about, coming back to English literature and whatnot. So I say, my renewed interest in English literature, and by extension art, allowed me to relive those moments of happiness and joy from my youth. I was even stunned when I came across an interview of the late Martin Lings, otherwise known as Shaykh Abu Bakr Sirajuddin, who spoke of the extreme state of joy he was in after seeing his first Shakespeare play, Othello, in the early 1930s. Not having read the play, he did not know what to expect, and even though, as he describes, the play is perhaps one of Shakespeare's most heart-rending plays, he was, quote, spellbound, and over the next few days I was plunged into an extraordinary state of happiness that I had never known before, end of quote. This immediately triggered for me a memory I had nearly forgotten, that I had had a similar experience after performing Shakespeare's Twelfth Night in high school one spring, even though I had a minor character. What is it about such forms of art that can produce such powerful feelings that we keep them in our conscious and subconscious minds? So this is an example. I mean, if you read Shakespeare, which everyone should read Shakespeare, it's the gift that keeps giving. I mean, you're always going to benefit from reading Shakespeare if you're an English speaker. Why? How about all the other stuff that we have in English that, okay, might be okay, but, or something like Tolkien, who is very quickly becoming, very seriously considered poet and literary figure of the English language. I mean, of course, it'll take another 100 years for the community to determine that, but for certain, I mean, there's a lot of benefit when you read The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit or Tolkien's other writings or his poetry. There's certainly a lot of research and academic research and studies about Tolkien. What is it about that? Right? It's because these people Shakespeare was a master of his craft. He was a master of the English language. What he's communicating in some of his character sketches, in some of his drama, is something that is timeless. The timeless stories of the tension between people, the character of people. So it's the same thing when you read, for example, something like by Imam al-Ghazali. If you read Imam al-Ghazali, which we all should, I mean, you're never going to be the same after that. I read Imam al-Ghazali's Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, Deliverance from Error, once a year. It's a very short book. It will only take you an afternoon to read it. It's like his short autobiography. But I mean, that book is unbelievable. It's unbelievable what this man went through. It's unbelievable what he's done to this for this ummah. It's some of the way he phrases things, the way he captures very complicated, things that are out there, and he just brings them into a couple of sentences. It leaves an impact on you that lasts forever. Because these people were masters. They were artists. They were able to communicate a sensation and a feeling. Now, of course, the art that I quote, I quote Shakespeare, I quote Marcel Proust, I quote Shelby Foote, I quote Mozart. I mean, I know a lot of Muslims would have a lot of objections to that. And I think I addressed that somewhere. I say, well, I'm not gonna read you the whole book, but I address those objections. And I know there's limits to some of the examples that I give. But my point is that I'm trying to impress upon the reader that the beauty of Islam comes from mastering Islam and communicating out that beauty. Allahu jamilun yuhibbul jamal, the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah is beauty and He loves that which is beautiful. So our Islam has to sound beautiful, has to look beautiful, has to be beautiful, has to inspire beauty, has to communicate beauty to the people around us. All the stuff I talk about in the first part of the book, Islamology, is ugly. Have you ever been in the mosque and been yelled at? That's ugly. Or if you've ever seen, somebody who's supposed to be like the learned person, but they lie and they steal. I mean, that's ugly. That's ugly stuff. That's not inspiring. As a matter of fact, these people push people away from the deen, push people away from the mosque, push people away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Where is the beauty? Where did that go? So the whole idea of regaining the art of Islam is I'm trying to impress upon all of us the need for us to master these sciences and these traditions. And by mastering the tools, so if you're a poet, you need to know what a poetic meter is, like you need to know what iambic pentameter is and those type of things to make the poem. I mean, I'm not a poet, I can't do that. But if there's a good poet, they'd be able to do that. But that's not enough. You can't just study the sciences. You have to change what's inside you. You have to be spiritually refined. You have to be a person of the haqiqah. You have to be a person of remembrance. And when you have these two together, then you've entered the gate the right way. And that's where your Islam becomes beautiful. Okay, last thing I'll do is let me just read for you the opening two paragraphs. Is that okay? Okay, the opening two paragraphs. The book starts today. It was a scene I witnessed 100 times. I would leave my Cairo flat in the Mohandisin suburb shortly after Fajr prayer and head towards the Al-Azhar Mosque in the old part of the city, a drive that normally takes about 30 to 45 minutes. In the early morning, the city is surprisingly empty, but by the time I drive through the outer gates of the ancient seminary, the hustle and bustle starts. Just as the ambient sounds of horns, peoples, markets, haggling, and the rest pick up, I quickly duck into the sanctuary of the mosque. The thick, high walls of Al-Azhar provide the needed shade from the Egyptian sun, especially in the summer months, and insulation against the sounds of the outside world. As the heat of the day increases, I, like so many of the other students, find relief in the shade. I greet the mosque with the customary 2 units of prayer, then sit against the wall and take out my books to review my lessons. The goal of this ritual is to wait for the Mufti glide. A short while later, and without any warning, Egypt's Grand Mufti emerges from one of the side entrances. There is no way to anticipate when this will happen. He simply appears and walks rapidly. His jurist robe is without buttons, so it is swung open by the pace of his gait. It drops just beneath his ankle, but slightly above the floor. You cannot see his feet nor his knees as they bend when he walks. Like something out of fantasy, he simply glides swiftly from the entrance on one side of the mosque to the schoolhouse, the Riwaq, on the other side where he teaches. Moths to a flame, the students encamped in the shaded area of the mosque quickly gather their books and run towards the Mufti, hoping to have the blessing of kissing his hand. There are so many of us that his hand remains extended as the students genuflect to kiss it. However, he remains stern with his glance firmly fixed in front of him, as if guiding his course and paying no attention to the supplicants. As quickly as he enters, so too does he duck into the Ottoman schoolhouse on the far side of the mosque and takes his place upon the teaching chair. He grabs the book placed next to him, opens it, and says, "Assalamu alaikum." So that's a little bit about the gate to Medina, regaining the art of Islam. Anybody have any questions? There's a sister, I think, in the back. Are you guys in the dark on purpose? Yeah, okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Shaykh, for that wonderful introduction. My first question is, do you have copies of the book so that I can get you to sign it?
The book is on Amazon. It's a print-on-demand book, so I didn't print like hundreds of copies. Yeah, so you can get it on Amazon. It's on Amazon Prime. It will arrive in a couple of days.
Second question. I never thought that I would come to Medina and listen to a talk by a scholar who mentions the book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. But you have, mashallah. But here's the question, is that when I read that book, I think I was in my mid-20s, I only understood about half of it. So it was exposing me to things I wasn't aware of or couldn't really understand. So can you please summarize the book, and how did that book sort of bring you to write about what you just talked about?
I can't summarize the book because it requires a background in Western philosophy. So if you haven't studied Greek philosophy, it's going to be very hard to understand the book. But what I can do is I can point you to Robert Pirsig himself. There are several interviews on YouTube that you can find. where he will do a much better job about explaining his journey. And you know, the book, writing the book almost caused him to go crazy, and he had to leave his job. I mean, it was a very overwhelming ordeal for him to write the book. But the idea behind Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance is, how do you understand beauty and aesthetics, and to appreciate that. And for people that are trained in the Western, you know, liberal arts, who would have been exposed to, you know, Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and the like, the book will resonate. How ugly the world has become and how we've left, you know, these type of things. And then his second book, it was really his second book not the first book. The first book led me to his second book. I didn't realize that he had written a second book. And when I find an author that I think is consequential, I do my best to read all of their writing, so I have a kind of a sense of the breadth of the thinker. And since he only wrote 2 books, I just got the second book. It was very easy to read, and that's where I discovered this term philosophology. I was like, oh man, where have you been, philosophology? Look what he says. So Pirsig says, oh, come on now. Oh, so this is what he says. Philosophology is to philosophy as musicology is to music, or as art history and art appreciation are to art, or as literary criticism is to creative writing. It's a derivative, secondary field, a sometimes parasitic growth that likes to think it controls its host by analyzing and intellectualizing its host's behavior. I was like, oh man, that's Islamology. That's exactly what Islamology is. Anybody else? Nobody else? Have any standard questions people have? Riba, bid'ah, haram, all the stuff we talk. Yeah.
You kind of just touched on these 4 sort of like fake versions of Islam. I'd like to hear more about that. The academic, the activist, so on and so forth.
Well, the academic study of Islam basically tries to take other theories of the study of religion and apply them to Islam, to interpret Islam through those theories. So it's creating a new type of usul, a new type of interpretive methodology. So if I take queer theory and I apply queer theory to the Quran, and what does that tell me about what the Quran means? If I take, you know, Marx or Marxism and I apply that to the Quran and Sunnah, how I'm going to read the Quran and Sunnah through the lens of Marxism. So that's all garbage. That has no real life application whatsoever. That's not how we practice our Islam. That might be some kind of interesting intellectual, I mean, I'm sorry to be blunt, it might produce some interesting intellectual outcome, but that's not Islam. That's not our Islam. That's something else. It's wrong. It's very, very dangerous. As I imagine, the whole Ba'ath party in Syria and Iraq, that's what they did. They tried to do stuff like that as an example. And Nasser in Egypt, and this idea of socialism, and try to use verses from the Quran to justify. That's very, very dangerous. So the academic study of Islam, you know, I call him the worst creature known to man. I mean, it's very, very dangerous and a very, very false Islam. And to do that, I use this, I don't know if you will know this book, but it's called What is Islam? His name always escapes me. This is what was at a time a very popular book, Shahab Ahmed, What is Islam? The importance of being Islamic. I mean, this was like hailed as like one of the greatest contributions to the study of Islam in English. And I just used some of his arguments to show you that it's nonsensical. I mean, that this whole approach is nonsensical. Why is it nonsensical? Because that's not how we interact with Islam. That's not how we interpret Islam and how we draw meaning for Islam for today. So that's the academic study of Islam. And then there's the Salafi extremist And you know, we all know the Salafi extremists and sort of where that's coming from. And that's an intellectually dumb Islam. So it's not to look at the breadth of Islam's diversity, but to only take a couple of figures at random from Islamic history and focus on them. And then that produces a warped Islam as well, because it's not full. Because Ibn Taymiyyah might have said interesting things, but how about the 10,000 other scholars that also said interesting things? Now you have to put them all together. Even as like a Shafi'i, I don't cite one Shafi'i source. I have to make sure that this opinion is shared by the community of Shafi'i jurists for me to say this is a Shafi'i opinion. So it's a very narrow, very narrow Islam. And then there's the untrained. And the untrained is what we call in logic al-jahl al-murakkab. They are compoundedly ignorant because they are ignorant of their own ignorance. Because they think they know, but they don't know. So they create a lot of damage by them not knowing that they don't know. So they don't know when not to answer. And the untrained is everywhere. It could be in the Shia community, in the Sunni community, it could be in the Salafi community, it could be in the Sufi community. Anybody who's untrained, who thinks that they are trained and they are able to lead, that's the real big danger. So this is too numerous, but I just label them as the untrained. And then the political activists, this is really the genesis of the Ikhwan, the Muslim Brotherhood, and developing another way about talking about Islam in the public space, which is to look at Islam only through the lens of power and politics. But Islam is much more than that. It's not about just power and politics. It's also about making wudu and paying your zakah and not lying and things like that. So the rise of the political activists. So and I have a big problem with this because in my understanding, religion does not belong in partisan politics. Religion is above partisan politics. Religion is at the level of high politics, the level of the state or the republic or the founding documents, the constitution, things like that. Below that, there is no religion is not a part of that. So you can't enter into a political party in the name of Islam. You can be a Muslim and be like this Zohran Mamdaniya. He's not saying in the name of Islam I'm running to be the mayor. He just happens to be a Muslim and I'm running to be mayor of New York and I want to do this for New Yorkers, etc. That's fine. I mean, he's a Muslim. Okay, obviously we know he's a Muslim. But he's not saying in the name of Islam. And what's ruining this country is exactly that. It's all these extremist Christians that are trying to bring their version of Christianity into partisan politics. But the framers, not only of this republic, but the framers of the Republican version of government in general from the Greco-Roman world, they were also opposed to that. And religion is not part of partisan politics. So the political activists' crime is that they have taken Islam, which is something that is meant to be here, and they put it something that is meant to be here. So those are the four examples that I give.
Two questions, if I may.
Please.
One is quick. The book that you were saying that Imam Ghazali wrote about.
Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, deliverance from error.
Good English translation.
Yeah, it's only one translation in English. You can get it from Fons Vitae. Deliverance from error. Everyone should read that book. Everybody. And if you don't like to read, you can watch. There's a docudrama that was made called Alchemy of Happiness. You can get it on YouTube. It's like an hour long, which is basically a docudrama narration of that entire book.
And then second one is, I guess, maybe some advice. In the khutbah you gave, mashallah, you explained like how we should be the best at what we do and where we're placed. But how do we? So for me individually, I'm medical profession. I was in teaching type of appointment before, and then I moved here to be closer to Medina. I left the teaching and research and that type of professorship in terms of my my role like practicing. Should I go back to that, or should I just continue to because I want to be more involved with the masjid and learning and maybe supporting.
Yeah, do what you can, but your primary vocation in the medical profession, be the your intention every day should be to be the best of that field or that subfield in the world. I mean, you literally have to talk to yourself like that. So what is it required of the best in that field?
So I kind of came down. That's what I'm saying. I was part of like a teaching institution, like medical college before. Now I'm like in a teaching hospital, but I'm not doing as much teaching and research. Should I go back to that?
If you feel inclined to go back, are you practicing medicine?
I practice medicine, but I'm not doing teaching and research.
Okay, I mean, if you're practicing medicine, that's fine. I mean, you also have to feel like a calling. If you don't want to go back to teaching, that's fine. But you're practicing medicine. That's why, I mean, be the best. Be good at what you do, and then think about, can we open a clinic? Can we help the disenfranchised? Can I get other Muslim doctors or non-Muslim doctors? Can we start like a free clinic? That's how you can do khidmah through that path. Are there young people that want to go into medicine? Can they intern with you? Can they shadow you? So embrace it. Don't run away from it. Yes, sister.
So between interest and usury, which one is haram and which one isn't?
Bank interest is not usury. Bank interest is not riba. Riba is something else. The interest that comes in the bank is not haram.
Please explain.
Do you have a question about the book?
Actually, I just wanted to ask, I guess 2 other books you would recommend.
About what?
Just like
The Quran is very good.
huh?
The Quran is very good.
I mean, not
I mean, what are you interested in?
top 3 books that are your favorites.
It depends. Favorite in what?
I guess on Islam, or just whatever interests you.
But what interests me might not interest you.
I mean, just
I would definitely recommend Imam al-Ghazali's Deliverance from Error. That's a very important book. And I would also recommend A Young Muslim's Guide to the Modern World by Sayyid Hussein Nasr. And I would also recommend A Thinking Person's Guide to Islam by His Royal Highness Prince Ghazi bin Muhammad.
One more question. Is the interest in university loans haram as well? Would it be considered haram?
That's different. That type of loan is different because it's a necessity sometimes to study. If there's no other ways to study, studying is a necessity. So sometimes the only way you can study is if you take out student loans. So those type of loans are different because also the collection on the loans is, well, I mean the laws are changing now, but they are different. There are a lot of debt relief, and if you work for a charity for X number, you can have relief, and so there are ways to mitigate it in the future. But in general, personal loans are haram. Not because they're ribawi, but because they lead to debt that you can't cover. But any loan with an asset between it is not called a loan, it's called finance, tamweel, and that is permissible.
And does that also include for housing as well, like mortgages and stuff?
Those are all permissible. Naam.
Let's say for a construction loan,
Oh God, here we go. Naam.
let's say for a construction loan, you plan on building whether it's a plaza or real estate, and then you plan on selling that real estate immediately. Right after you sell it, you plan on paying that construction loan back. Is that would that
As opposed to not paying it back and fleeing the country. I mean, what kind of introduction is that to a question?
No, in terms, so there's two different scenarios. One is you sell it and then you pay it back, or you, in this case, real estate, where you give it to tenants and then with their rent you pay it back slowly. So that would,
Are you talking about the speed of paying?
essentially, yeah.
The speed of paying makes no difference in the hukum. The loan is permissible because there's an asset between you and it, so it's not a loan, it's finance. The problem is we keep calling it a loan, a qard. And when you say the word qard in fiqh, it goes to another section. كل قرض جفع نفعا فهو ربا. So the traditional fuqaha, they said, oh, that's haram. But it's not a qard, it's tamweel, it's finance. So it's different.
Who is the audience of this book? Like, what was in your mind when you were writing this book? Is it a book for an ordinary layman person, or is you are talking about the people who are in this field?
No, the book is not an academic book. I mean, it's not meant for, it's meant for a general audience. But a general audience that is intellectually inquisitive. So you have to have some background. You have to, if I say Mozart and you're like, who's that? I mean, you're not going to get far. If I say Shakespeare and you're like, who's that? Or A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, it's not for you. Or Imam al-Ghazali, you're like, who's that? It's definitely not for you. But short of that, I mean, I have references and footnotes in case people want to follow up some of my claims, but it should be easily read. It's not that long, and I don't know if anyone has read it, but it's not that complicated.
This is precious. I just ordered this, so excited to read it. You depicted a lot of the notations between Shakespeare and Mozart. Did you reference anyone else on the other spectrum in Islam to create connective tissue between it, in terms of the beauty of Islam that you're trying to...
Oh yeah. I mean, I have, I quoted Suyuti, I quoted Ghazali, I quote Al-Alish. There's a beautiful quote by Al-Alish who talks about how the mujtahid is the saint. They're one and the same person, and ma'rifah. I quote extensively, but I mean, those names are not going to be known in a general audience as much as the Western names. But yes, of course, I correlate between them.
Now that you have written this incredible book, what's the feeling that you're left with? That if you were to rewrite it, how would that be different?
I mean, when you put in the effort to write something, I mean, this takes quite a bit of effort. Rewriting it is not in the vocabulary. I mean, it has already been rewritten so many times to get to where it is, because it was just one half, and then I realized it's two halves. No. So I mean, I've done that. I'm done. I'm not gonna. I can't rewrite it. But my feeling is, I feel that I was finally able to capture in these words a lot of what was bothering me, and for me, it's a great relief, because when something is bothering you for so long and you're searching, like, what is it, like exactly what's going on, and then you finally, oh, that's what it is. I'm excited to share it and to get people to talk about it, not because I want credit, but because I want people to feel that yes, we can regain a beautiful Islam, and it's not that complicated. And hopefully I've given everyone the kind of the map and the categories to talk about it. So relief, excitement, there's a little bit of grief, because now you're like, okay, what do you do next? And I have to keep continue, and so I'm thinking about that as well. But when you do the work yourself, I had to get someone to typeset it. I worked with Selwa on the cover art, and it's overwhelming because publishing houses don't want to publish things like that. It's also a challenge. So I'm grateful that I get to share it with you. So all of those emotions all mixed in one. Yes. So.
May I ask one more question? Earlier you mentioned that we need to study, we need to improve ourselves. So it's not enough to be a scholar, but also to let that knowledge change us. So what hope is there for us, us normal Muslims who are not scholars? Can we have an Islam that expresses it as an art?
Yes, of course. It's through tasawwuf. Tasawwuf is how you convert yourself into a piece of that art. And that's why I'm recommending this, the book by Imam al-Ghazali, because that's the conclusion that Imam al-Ghazali comes from. He said, I went with these people, I went with this group, I went with this group, and this group's problem is such and such, this group, it's only the Sufis that actually do the work. Everyone else is just talking about it. These people actually do it, and it's transformative. And it's as simple as that. And I just want people to take Islam seriously. I don't want us to think that Islam is this like sloppy, simple. No, it's a very beautiful, sophisticated thing, and we need to take it seriously. And this is the inheritance at the end of the day of the Prophet ﷺ. So we need to own up to that, and we need to do our best to receive it and then pass it on in an unadulterated way. So I want Muslims to take Islam seriously. Now.
I don't know if somebody asked already. I have a question about the loan. So my question is, how does
Why did I mention that? No.
how does Islamic loan halal?
Say that again?
How does Islamic loan is halal?
The Islamic loan is halal because they just call it different things. But the Islamic banks do the same thing that the conventional banks do.
So is it really halal?
Of course it's halal. And the conventional bank is halal too. The way we described it. Okay?
So I'm buying a house with conventional loan.
Buy a house and make dua from you. But when you buy a house, do a dhabiha and feed people. This is a sunnah. It's called al-wakira. Do a dhabiha and feed people to bless your house.
So both are conventional loan and
Both are halal. Yes.
does it call Izara or something?
Naam?
Izara?
I don't know. The Islamic banking thing is unknown to me. It's not. But the conventional mortgages is halal. Okay. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. وصلى اللهم على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا.